Hi, this is Matthew Bezdicek here from the NuWay Agronomy team. We got Jon Zuk here as well, trying to keep you guys informed about sulfur and sulfur management in the cornfield. This is our second video that we're putting on for you guys. We're back at the same field to try and analyze how this looks now, kind of do an assessment. We did take a tissue sample roughly around that V6, V7 time frame, and in that tissue sample it did come back potassium, nitrogen, and sulfur deficient. One of the things that we know is going on still is that we're kind of lacking moisture. So Zuk, how does a lack of moisture possibly play into why we would have seen a tissue sample result that was deficient on nitrogen, potassium, and sulfur?
Well, you got to remember that all three modes of nutrient uptake require moisture. So mass flow, nitrogen and sulfur come in through mass flow, but potassium comes in through diffusion. So we need moisture for those two, and also root interception, just plain root growth is needed. What we've seen earlier in this field, we can see hints of it, but also in plots is we had a kind of a drought-induced potassium deficiency because the plant was moving potassium down back into the roots to neutralize those roots to try to grab as much nitrate, N, into the plant as we could.
Okay, so, you know, as we're going more into tassel time now, what can we see still, or I know we picked a corn plant out of this. Now granted, we tried to manage this best we can to try and get as much sulfur out here as we could, but we do still think possibly drought was kind of playing into the factor here, but we actually did find a plant that had what we think is sulfur deficiency.
So we found a few plants that we thought were sulfur deficiency. We could definitely see it. We picked one that was a little bit more visual. So I picked one here that was pretty close to tassel. It's still a little bit early yet, but one thing you can see with this plant is if I rip this leaf off, you might be able to see you got some sulfur striping. The sulfur striping is going to show up on the top part of the plant because sulfur is immobile in the plant, whereas typically we'd see nitrogen, potassium at the bottom part of the plant. So now that the plant probably has enough nitrogen in it, it's focusing more on reproduction. It's now trying to mobilize that nitrogen back down to the ear, and it needs sulfur to do that. So we'll start to see some sulfur striping at the top and then work its way down from the plant. So that gives a little bit of interveinal chlorosis, and that's what we're picking up hints of in the field here.
Gotcha. I mean, what we still can do is once we get to full tassel, we can take an ear leaf tissue sample to kind of get a final report card, but what I'll tell you guys is don't be discouraged if we do see sulfur deficiency. It does seem like this drought stress that we've had has kind of caused some of those deficiencies that we've had out there. So even if you are trying to manage your sulfur correctly, don't be totally discouraged because it might be something that's a little bit out of our hands.
So the one thing that could fix that, there's still some opportunity. If we do catch some moisture, 95% of our sulfur is taken in through mass flow. So if we get water coming up into the plant, it's probably because of the use of elemental sulfur, especially in this field, and the multiple timings of sulfur being applied at planting and then back at side dress. There's probably a lot of sulfur in the soil. It's just a matter of getting it up into the plant so we can utilize it late season.
Gotcha. We will be back again for one last video trying to see if we do rebound a little bit or if we do start seeing a lot of that sulfur getting kind of stripped from the top of the plant. We'll also talk a little bit about sulfur sources that we can kind of game plan for next year. The combination of the elemental, thiazole, AMS, where they kind of fit, and then how we can kind of regroup and try and manage for the next year. So till then, stay tuned.